Somewhere in this world, there is a man sitting in a room that is too quiet for someone still living in it. You notice it before anything else, not sadness, not loneliness, but something more precise, the quiet of someone who has stopped expecting anything from the next hour. I had met him once before, briefly, long enough to remember the way he smiled too quickly, like a reflex trained over years. The second time, he wasn't smiling. He was sitting with a cup of coffee that had gone cold, not drinking it, not ignoring it, just existing beside it, the way people do with things they've forgotten how to use. The room had one window, and the late afternoon light came through at an angle that made everything feel like it was already part of the past. We spoke at first about nothing important, the kind of conversation that fills space without touching anything real. Then he looked at the window and said something that shifted everything. I've been thinking about what I optimized for, not what he wanted, not what he chose, what he optimized for. It was the language of a man who had spent decades building a life like a system, efficient, functional, successful. The problem, I began to understand, was not the execution, it was the objective. He had been extraordinary, the kind of success that arrives slowly, then all at once. He had stood in rooms where people waited for his attention and gave it carefully, strategically, always with purpose. He knew how to move, how to read, how to win. And now he sat in that quiet room, speaking to someone he barely knew, because the people who knew him best had grown used to a version of him that didn't know how to begin this conversation. Then he said it. I had a daughter. No drama, just a fact. He told me she used to leave drawings outside his office door. Not knock, just leave them. He kept them, moved them from house to house, always in a drawer. He remembered nodding when she described things. He didn't remember listening. That was the first fracture. Not a failure of love, but a failure of attention. He had been there, physically, consistently, responsibly. He had done everything that looks like presence from the outside. But he had been elsewhere, inside something that mattered to him deeply, his work, his purpose, his belief that building something meaningful was a form of care, and that was the mistake, not the work, not the ambition, the assumption that providing and being present were the same thing. He told me about the call 2 years ago. She said she didn't want him to be surprised when the invitation didn't come to her wedding. She wasn't angry, that was what stayed with him. She was calm. She said she loved him. She just needed the room to be filled with people who knew her. And in that moment, he realized he didn't. Not really. He knew facts, history, details, but not her, not the way she meant. Then he said the sentence that changes the shape of everything around it. I was present for all the milestones and absent for all the moments. And it turns out the moments were the whole thing. He didn't say it with regret in the dramatic sense. He said it like a conclusion, like something he had finally proven to himself after years of being certain of the opposite. We sat in silence after that. The light moved across the floor, slowly, indifferently. He had started calling her again. She answered sometimes. She told him recently she was glad he called, that she wouldn't have said that months ago, but she could say it now. He almost smiled when he told me. Not the fast practice smile I remembered. Something slower, something that cost him. I'll take it, he said. I left as the light disappeared from the room. The cup was still on the table, and I kept thinking about something he never said directly, but left behind in the way he spoke. There are people who master the wrong fluency, who become exceptional at reading opportunity, timing, progress, but never learn the simpler, quieter language of presence. The kind that doesn't optimize, the kind that doesn't build, the kind that just notices. I thought about the drawings in the drawer, the fact that he kept them even when he didn't yet understand why they mattered. Some part of him knew, some part of him always knew. He just didn't know how to stop long enough to meet that knowledge while it was still happening. And maybe that's the only thing a story like this asks for: not change, not resolution, not even action, just attention, real attention. The kind that doesn't wait for significance to announce itself, because the moments never do. And if he's right, and I think he is, those moments aren't part of the story, they are the whole thing. One sentence I can't forget: I was there for everything except what mattered.